reviewing a brain injury case, I'm often asked what important information an attorney derives from knowing that a skull fracture has taken place. In representing a person who has sustained a traumatic brain injury, it is important for a lawyer to know whether a skull fracture has taken place, since the force of impact necessary to cause a fracture to the skull implies that severe damage most probably has taken place within the brain itself. The brain injury attorney needs to carefully consider and investigate all possible injuries to obtain proper compensation for his or her client. Skull fractures frequently result from high-speed car crashes, from falls on ice and other uneven surfaces where the individual strikes their head on the ground. There are some types of skull fractures, however, which are not easily detectable by routine skull x-rays, yet do present classic signs that a skull fracture has taken place, and the brain injury attorney needs to be aware of these types of fractures. One such sign is known as raccoon eyes, which are black and blue marks around the eyes. This injury is caused by a basal skull fracture, a fracture at the base of the skull, and represents damage to the thin bone that separates the skull from the nose area called the cribriform plate. Another sign of a skull fracture is the presence of black and blue marks behind the ear area and behind the neck. This is known as a battle sign and is associated with a unique type of fracture known as an ipsilateral skull fracture. A person who has sustained a skull fracture has a far greater chance of sustaining bleeding within the brain and damage to nerve cells far away from the point of impact. This damage to the brain and nerve cells requires careful assessment by neuropsychological testing to determine what cognitive deficits have resulted. An attorney representing a person who has sustained a skull fracture needs to know that their client has an increased risk of developing a seizure disorder or traumatic epilepsy. The presence of a skull fracture also increases the chances that the client has sustained damage to the nerve cells that control the sense of taste and smell. These senses are often not tested as part of a standard neurological examination and are often missed by lawyers and doctors who do not understand traumatic brain injury. Another problem that often develops as a result of a skull fracture are difficulties in processing sounds and increased sensitivity to loud noises. Often patients with a skull fracture develop a condition known as tinnitus, with constant ringing in their ears. Other times, individuals sustain a condition known as hyperacusis, which is extreme sensitivity to loud noise or background noise that can't be blocked out. Dizziness must also be investigated after a skull fracture. To represent an individual who has sustained a traumatic brain injury, a lawyer needs to know the full extent of the brain damage sustained by their client. Only through careful questioning of the client and careful evaluation of the individual's hospital and medical records, as well as radiological studies, can a full understanding of all brain injuries be obtained. The proper representation of a client with brain damage takes both skill and patience. If I can assist you with your brain injury case, you can telephone me toll-free at 1-866-BRAIN-LAW. You can email me at michael@brainlaw.com. You can also get more information about traumatic brain injuries and our brain injury practice by visiting our website, www.brainlaw.com.